address the elephant in the room. You all created content that had the room kind of like tense. Was it just me?
No.
No? All right. It felt like you left the audience with something to think about. And I think that as filmmakers, especially as growing filmmakers, I think that's something that we look for as we look at narrative and our theme and storytelling. You know, what are the lessons? What are the things that we want people to walk away with having the conversations about? One of the things that I definitely appreciated, and I'm gonna let you all kind of talk a little bit about it, but even for Brad, I see you have your Bible. And
Yes,
and
please
I
go.
listen, I looked up, I said, okay, Leviticus, let's talk. Leviticus 16, which talked about the Day of Atonement. But I'm gonna let you talk about what you have there for us, because what I love about film is that we can embed redemptive elements in it and not necessarily have to say Jesus. So talk about what you're gonna say.
All right. First off, I'm going to say this right here, right now. I'm a Christian, recently baptized, so amen to that. Amen. So my film deals with a very, I'm sure you probably can see it, a very dark, serious topic that I think is very under talked about both in the church and reality, because it's very, not really looked down upon, but very shunned. I guess shunned, but like kind of like, hey, you shouldn't talk about it because, you know, we gotta focus on A, B, C, D. So let me read you one of the quotes that was up there. I'm going to provide some context. Colossians 3:19. This is the New American Standard Version. Wives should be subjugated to your husbands as fitting in the Lord. And here's the ticker. Husbands, love your wives and do not become bitter against them. So it seems like to me, contrary to what some people will preach, the biblical text is actually pretty anti-abuse. Wouldn't you say so? So one of the few, I guess I'll start with the inspirations. A while ago, I saw a video from Gamer from Mars, one of my favorite YouTubers, about a game called Sad Satan. And in the game, it seemingly suggests various things about, again, about a different, much darker topic, but again, like abuse topic, but much darker, like Jimmy Savile and JFK. But that's not really too relevant. Also, some other influences are suicidemouse.avi, which is one of the most famous creepypastas out there, Lost Media related. But yeah, like, sorry, I'm trying to think.
You're fine. I'll give you a minute. I'm gonna go to, I want to say Brianna Madeline, and then we're gonna come back to you for sure, because I have some more questions for you.
Sure.
Let's talk about you all. First of all, the camera movement that just kept the story going. It was beautiful. But let's talk about your inspiration and your use of setting the stage with your actors and the theme that you use to drive your story forward. Let's talk about that.
So I'm not a student anymore, but I'm still local to the southern area, and I like to work with students whenever I can. And so Brianna reached out to me last year and was like, hey, do you want to write and direct my project? And we sat down, and I don't even remember what the first idea was that I came to you with. It's gone. But I was like, yeah, I was thinking this, and she was like, oh, okay, yeah. You don't like it, do you? It's like, I mean, it's not really what I was going for. I was like, oh, okay, that's totally fine. Like, this is your project. You can tell me what you want. And she said that she wanted to go for something a bit more dark and a bit more spooky, a bit more grungy, I think was the word. And I'd never done that before. This was definitely out of my wheelhouse a little bit. We talked about kind of the general thematic we kind of settled on was sort of the trope being like a deal with the devil. And so I did a bunch of research on mythology, read a bunch of Aesop's fables, I'm also a bit of a nerd. I play a lot of D&D, and so the inspiration for the character of the Collector came from tales of the Fae, where they very much care about your words and about rules. Not moral rules, not societal rules, but their own personal rules. If they can get you in the fine print, they got you. And when I was looking up terminology used in card games, I found according to Hoyle to mean like, oh, buy the book. So that was sort of the inspiration that led that story.
Awesome, thank you. And you can see it in your actor, the Collector. He had me. Samlin, let's talk to you a little bit. Yesterday we were able to see a piece for you that highlighted the Black culture. And then today we were able to see a piece that appears to talk a little bit about colorism within the Black community. Could you speak on your inspiration behind that piece? And I know in a diverse place, sometimes it's hard to talk about things that happens within the Black community without people feeling a little uptight. But talk a little bit about your inspiration with this piece on colorism.
So for me, it was never supposed to be like a teachable moment. I just wanted to highlight something that's real, and I feel like I've experienced as well as other Black women. And I know that colorism is definitely a thing that, you know, is happening now, but I don't think there's as much of an emphasis on colorism in the Black community, which is like a real thing. Yeah, I never wanted it to be a teachable moment. I didn't want it to be like, I'm gonna teach the white people in here what's going on. I never wanted it to be that way. But the inspiration was to create something real.
All right, could you tell us a little bit about the ending? I know some could have been confused with the switch in the bathtub. Could you talk about that a little bit?
So the switch in the bathtub, that pretty much represented how the lighter-skinned woman, she wanted to be the darker-skinned girl, but in reality, like the darker-skinned girl wanted to be her as well. So like just that level of wanting something that you can't have because you don't love yourself or whatever the case may be. So that is what it represents.
Awesome, thank you. Brad, back to you.
All right. Okay, so I know you mentioned earlier the Leviticus 16:8 line, so I'll read this one again. Aaron shall cast lots for 2 goats, one lot for the Lord and the other lot for the scapegoat, or as it also is translated as Azazel, which in non-canonical biblical text is a creature known as the Watcher, which are like fallen angels that bred with humans and created their children are the Nephilim. And Azazel is essentially the most dangerous of the Watchers who taught mankind, hey, would you like to learn more about our weaponry? Here you go. But yeah, like some of the other things I also wanted to tie were like I think you saw the 3 people I referenced. Gertrude Benedinsky, who is the woman who had her eyes blacked out, Chris Brown, and Joseph Stalin. So I'll walk through each of those. So disclaimer, some of this, it's a little graphic. Gertrude Benedinsky is a infamous child abuser who was supposed to protect a child, and after when stuff got really difficult financially, she abused her, and her children did as well. She almost got away with it. If it wasn't for one of her kids inside, she would have gotten away with it. Chris Brown, of course, we all know the Rihanna situation. I'm still surprised a lot of people have respect for him, for his music, because of that. I know as a man, if I heard one of my men did that, I can support you. No. And then Joseph Stalin is, I guess, the more political one, because at least to me, like not to get political, there's a lot of attraction, at least for Gen Z and millennials, to be very attracted to socialist ideologies like Maoism and Stalinism. But when you actually look at the history of that, Joseph Stalin is also a notorious abuser, according to the Soviet records, abuser to the point where she committed suicide. And well, he abused his country with the Great Purges to the point where only he was dominant. So, like, what essentially what I'm saying is, like, anyone who engages that behavior they're demons. They're not, I mean, I have animal references, like it's animal-like behavior, but they're demons, straight up. And it's sinful, it's disgusting, and it's very damaging to many generations. And it's a pandemic that not only affects us here, but around the globe.
Thank you. Thank you so much for your perspective and your outlook and your creativity. You know, we don't often talk about mysticism, but just even the way you chose to implement those different things in there. I want to go back to Brianna with your producing. What was the most challenging part about you bringing everything together?
So I would say the most challenging thing for sure was the location. And believe it or not, it's pretty hard to find like abandoned looking locations that you're actually allowed to shoot in. And the place that we eventually found was also an active construction site. So we had a lot more like loops to jump through to eventually shoot there. But I mean, what was his role? There's this guy named Corey. Yeah, he was amazing. Yeah, he wasn't the person we were supposed to talk to. He just showed up and was like, all right, this is everything. And he was so helpful. It wasn't even funny. Like, we were shooting overnight, so, because the room was like half caved in, so we couldn't just like fake it. And he would just show up and like bring us stuff like, oh, I found these propane heaters, you know, and like all this stuff, and he was just really great. And I'm glad he like sort of came with the location, but the location was very difficult to get.
Awesome. Samlin, I saw that you were actually in your particular film. Talk about directing as well as acting in the content at the same time.
So I don't act. I prefer to be in the background. I don't like to be on camera. But what was the question again? How was that? How was that? It was okay. Like I think sometimes it's really hard to find actors. So for me, I just kind of just use the resource as me being the resource. So I was like, it's easier just to control myself rather than to coordinate schedules with somebody else and figure out if it can work with them. So acting wasn't hard because I knew exactly what I wanted. Directing wasn't hard because I knew exactly what I wanted because I was directing myself. But it was an interesting experience for sure.
Awesome. As we wrap up, I'm coming back to you, Brad. As we get ready to wrap up, I just wanted to affirm each and every one of you, your sound design, your use of music as you drove the story, your cutting, your pacing, even in those things. I know, Samlin, for you, just the ending when the young lady was trying to put on the makeup and the play there. And then, of course, for you all, as the camera movement was happening, the build-up in the audio, the same in the chorus for Brad, just the cutting, to build that intensity. And so as you are going through these things and as we're looking at the different elements of filmmaking, I encourage you to keep doing that. Give you the last word, Brad, quickly as you wrap up.
So this is just about the film too. I'm sure you saw the Cyrillic lettering on the wall. It's Ukrainian. It basically translates to "Why'd you do this to me, my love?" And I don't remember where it came from, but there's a program that showed a few Russians being interviewed when the Ukrainian war started, and they were like, "What? I don't get why our government's doing this. They're like our brothers. We have family there, and friends. So Slava Ukraine."
Awesome. As we get ready to walk away, I want each of you to encourage your peers with one word. One word.
Always create. Even if it's so minute and so insignificant, write it down, because if you don't write it down, you're going to forget. I mean, like obviously there's like exceptions to the rule. Always write down any ideas you have for anything. That's essentially what I gotta say. Always write it down, because you're going to forget it. If you write it down, you're going to remember. That's why I always write down notes and stuff when I have dreams, so I can have potential ideas for films.
Awesome. Sam.
Try.
Try. Madam.
Did you mean literally or?
Literally. You got
Listen.
a sentence? Got a sentence? Listen.
Experience.
Experience. So put that together, you all. Write it down, try, listen, experience. All right? Be encouraged. Thank you again. Give it up for these parents.
All right, before we break for lunch, I did want to give you a small update. We are going to be updating the schedule